Content warnings. This episode includes discussions of child and animal abuse, child and animal death, emotional manipulation, starvation, hanging, and body horror.
Welcome everybody to everyone's favorite podcast about Gemini movies. This time we're not talking about movies. I'm your host, Alice, and my co-host.
Hi, I'm Ludovico. Alice. Thank God I don't believe in murderers.
Wow, that's fucked up. That's
a quote from the book we're talking about today, which is The Adventures of Pinocchio.
Yeah?
From Carlo Collodi.
So this is a very special episode. This is part one of a three-part series on Pinocchio. The third part actually has to do with Gemini movies. We did a bit of research, inspired into this.
Only a bit of research, only almost a year.
It's the year of Pinocchio. When this episode's uploaded, you're going to see we have some new art for the podcast. I hope you enjoy, and we're going to remove things a bit the traditional structures for this first two episodes. So let's start with this. Ludo, please.
Okay, so to begin with, let's give y'all some background on the book of Pinocchio and the era and the place it comes from. The Adventures of Pinocchio is a book that was released in 1883 by Carlo Collodi, which his real name is Carlo Laurenti, but his pen name is named after the place where he grew up, Collodi. Mm-hmm. He grew up in a very interesting era of Italy because Italy as a nation didn't exist when he was born. It was different kingdoms and states that were mostly controlled by Austria and our favorites, the Habsburgs. Everybody loves them.
Icons.
But there was basically multiple movements and wars of independence during his lifetime, two of which he fought in for a unification of Italy. And there were different models for what that state would look like. And I just want to mention one here because it's very funny. One of the ideas was a theocratic confederation led by the Pope.
What?
Yeah, they wanted the Pope to rule over Italy from the papal state.
My favorite Italian.
And the only reason that didn't happen is that Pope Pius did side with the Austrians and the Habsburgs because he wanted to keep his global influence and not piss them off. So he sided with them, and there was a lot of bloodshed. It's a very interesting period, a ton of different nations and parties got involved. There were the people the conspiracists love.
Wait, the Illuminati?
No, the Masons. The stonemasons were involved in building a movement to unify Italy and shit. A lot of stuff is going down in this time. So we're not going to go into detail here because we could literally do a 3-parter just about this period of Italy.
Yeah, that's when this podcast becomes a history podcast.
Yeah, we're not going to do that. But I recommend everybody read up on this era because it's fascinating.
Yeah, but one of these days I will get you, Dan Callan. One of my 20 enemies. 200 enemies.
So Collodi fought in two of these wars, and by the time he wrote Pinocchio, Italy was unified, but he was a Republican, so his vision of Italy was to be a republic, but it ended up being a monarchy.
Yeah.
So he was like very disillusioned with the state of Italy at the time. And so a lot of that comes like out in his writing. He lived in Tuscany, which is where Collodi is. I have relatives there, so I know the region pretty well.
Well, yeah.
And his first some of his writing got banned there before the unification because he was basically making fun of politics. It was basically a parody newsletter.
Yeah.
And yes, a lot of this is gonna come up in Pinocchio as a book. So I think that sets the stage for like the time and the person which created Pinocchio as a text. It was one of the, you could say it was one of the first truly Italian books, because the Italian state didn't exist before. Like we think of Dante's Inferno as an Italian text, but like as a nation, Italy didn't exist back then.
Yeah.
So this was really when Italy became a thing as a state.
Just a couple extra things, like after Italy got unified as a kingdom, Collodi became very much disillusioned with like Italian politics and like writing like further doubts. And the other thing that I think is very also important is Pinocchio is also, how Pinocchio was made is also kind of unique, because it was put it in a children's newspaper as episodes. And like first children's newspapers and this type of thing don't really exist anymore, but that, so this type of episodic writing technically still exists in like newsletters and stuff like that, but it's very much different from what it was at the time. Like Pinocchio was very much like an episodic novel.
Yeah, it was specifically a newspaper for kids, so to basically motivate them to read.
Yeah.
So there's like a lot of things here about like about child literature at the time and how it evolved from like fairy tales to the more modern forms. So let's give a short overview about the story, because I think most people have seen or heard one or more adaptations of Pinocchio.
Yeah.
So the base premise is there is a wooden puppet that is alive and sentient called Pinocchio, made by Geppetto, which is basically his dad. And it goes through various misadventures to basically learn life lessons or also learn about society and morals. Yeah. And then at the end, it becomes a real boy by the blue fairy, who is also a very important character.
Yes.
That basically summarizes the entire story, but the devil is in the details, because I think a lot of people don't really know the original text, and I think we didn't really know it either when we started this project.
Yes.
And there's a lot in there. There's a lot to chew on. Like in Italy, this Pinocchio is actually like studied as a serious literature text, because it's more deep than one might assume.
It's interesting because like this happens with a lot of media, but specifically Pinocchio is like, if you know one version of Pinocchio, it's either the original Disney version or something riffing on the Disney version. And like that's warped to like, that will always be warped to like the weird like American culture imperialism, but that's just 40s Disney stuff and what Disney's viewing things. So like, because of that, what the differences between like the book and what Pinocchio comes in like mainstream pop culture outside of Italy in some places is very stark and very different. And like once you actually read the book, you see a lot of stuff in both social context, in both how the book is written, and just like a lot of stuff you don't expect.
Yeah. It's actually there's more going on than the Disney version makes you think.
Yeah.
and a lot has been lost in the many adaptations.
Yeah.
So let's just go to the real meat of this episode, which is we're gonna talk about a lot of the chapters that we found interesting, and we're gonna like point out stuff that people might not know about the original text or stuff that had been changed in most adaptations.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna pick the first chapter, and then it's gonna be Alice's turns. We're gonna go chronologically through the book.
Yeah, we're not gonna cover everything. This is just basically our favorite, or like more interesting to think about chapters.
Yeah. This I recommend everybody to like check out the book because it's really funny and witty, and
Yeah.
it has a lot of interesting stuff in there. It's a good book, not just for children.
It's also like, as I say, this is like a quick overview of like why we like Pinocchio. It's a very like breezy book because it is not that short, but because it's episodic, like basically for most of its chapters, even if tied in on a narrative, or like standalone. So you go from one chapter to the other, and they're very breezy, and it's a fun time, man.
Yeah, it's a good read, and it's an easy read because it has like natural ending points for you to put it down at the end of chapters.
Yeah. Okay. Let's speak about the first chapter.
Yeah, we're going to start with the first chapter because there's some big stuff in the first chapter.
Yeah.
Um, First off, it starts with like a subversion of fairy tale tropes,
Yes.
which is often like mentioned in articles we read about it. That it basically sets you up to think it's gonna be about a king or a prince or something like from royalty, and then no, it's gonna be about a piece of wood. So Collodi is immediately going into this like satirical way of writing,
And
which I find very good.
I think it's very much specific to us or note that he says like a king and stuff like that. Like as we noted, Collodi was like a republican dissolutionist with like the kingdom of like with Italy becoming a kingdom. So you can notice like this the test and discuss the novelty already to very clever like just setting up the story and subverting it.
Yeah. This is immediately telling you like this text isn't messing around. It's gonna go for the throat. Um, so there's a really big difference here because in Disney's version, the Blue Fairy basically, and in a lot of versions, the Blue Fairy gives life to Pinocchio, but in the book version, the wood is just sentient. Like there's
Yeah.
just a piece of wood that is alive, and a drunken guy sells it, gives it to Geppetto to work on. Master
Yeah.
Cherry.
I know you mentioned that it has like a very like animist aspect to it.
Yeah, we're gonna go more into that in the readings, but like there's like a lot of Celtic and pagan traditions that have like animist properties to trees and wood. So that is something to keep in mind.
I also just it's a thing I also mention and think about often like in a lot of places in specific like Southern Europe like also Italy or includes Italy a lot of folklore a lot of myths you kind of just believe in it you kind of don't need a logical explanation like how like in America there's like cryptid hunters you kind of just believe in the folklore you believe that things are alive in a way
Yeah,
it's
and
like
that is like a big difference of this book to a lot of more modern literature, fantasy or fairy tale literature that like explains the rules and gives you the lore.
yeah
This is not like this. Like throughout this entire book, things will just happen. Like
it
supernatural or fantastical elements will just appear and they're never explained. It's just you have to deal with it.
like like I think, like I said, it feels very much like locked in like local folklore, even though Pinocchio is not folklore; it's a story. Though it gets complicated, we talk probably a lot later about that. It's like,
Yeah, Collodi also translated a bunch of French fairy tales about like fairies and stuff into Italian.
yeah, it's like to give an example, like in Portugal, like in Portugal, you kind of just like if you believe in like the supernatural, you kind of just like you don't need to an explanation why you're so sleepy. The moon gnome that puts you to sleep was een actual wat is meer te inzicht. You just believe in so sleepy the moon gnome. You don't need a logical explanation in a lot of these type of folklore things. You can just believe in it. And I feel
Yeah.
like that aspect is like put in like Pinocchio. I know those readings of like this as like one of the first like magical realistic tests and stuff like that. Also,
Yeah, it can definitely be interpreted as this.
yeah.
That's chapter one. What is the next chapter that you picked?
I choose a very interesting chapter. It's chapter 4.
Okay.
The story of Pinocchio and the talking cricket, which shows the naughty children can't stand to be collected by those who know best. Okay, so chapter 4. Chapter 4 is very much fun because everyone knows the cricket. Like, the cricket in Pinocchio is very interesting for various reasons, but like, in chapter 4, the Pinocchio encounters a cricket. Which, as you know, in like the other like traditions of Pinocchio adaptations, is the companion Pinocchio who's his conscience. So Pinocchio meets the cricket. The cricket tries to like say, "Hey, Pinocchio, do better," and Pinocchio just stomps him, literally kills him by throwing a boot.
Doesn't he smash it with a mallet?
Yeah, I'm mad. Sorry.
Yeah, because that gets referenced in Dragon Ball Z.
Wow.
Yeah, Akira Toriyama, big Pinocchio fan.
But yeah, I think this is very much interesting in more that. Like, I picked this up not because it's just wow, fucked up, the cricket dies, because here's the thing, the cricket returns later on as a ghost, it's weird, but just, the chapter is very interesting, because I feel like, first establishes a weird thing, a pattern of like, there's an animal that shows up, that teaches Pinocchio some lesson, tries to teach him, and then just dies. It provides Pinocchio some force, which is a weird recurring gag as a theme. But second, I think this chapter is very interesting in how the patterns, like there's already more stuff happening, like the guidance of like Pinocchio. Somebody tries to guide Pinocchio, put some or like do some lesson, and Pinocchio just rejects it in a way because he is a kid, and also because he's still like learning reality, which I
Yeah,
find
yeah, yeah.
interesting.
He is basically a scampish blank slate at the start of the story. He has no knowledge of the world. And
Yeah,
he has to learn how to like deal with reality and what consequences are. Which is connected to the next chapter I'm going to talk about.
yeah, just as I want to say, somebody in another server I once said this whole chapter read as like a Dark Souls quest or something. It does feel very Dark Souls actually.
Yeah, you just meet a weird character and it exposes to you and then it dies.
Yeah, like I think also I just want to say I think I really like this chapter because it puts in like a really talented writing things because this is just one conversation and like it still felt a lot of humor, a lot of writing, less things just they introduced the cricket by saying quick 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 like this cricket sound and then when Pinocchio kills him there's this line where perhaps he did not mean to hit him at all but unfortunately he hit him square on the head with his last breath the ball cricket quite quick quick and then died on the spot which is
Yeah.
wonderful writing and just some dark humor probably yeah so
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
just
there's a lot of dark humor and like literal gallows humor
So
later.
this chapter introduces a lot of fun stuff, the humor, like the setting up of stuff, the recurring theme of like Pinocchio disrespecting morality. It's very good. I like it a lot.
Okay, next is chapter 5 and 6, which are about poverty and hunger, which is like a topic that is very prevalent in the story, but often neglected in the adaptations.
This is our first because my next chapters were 5 and 6 also.
Yeah, because this is very important, like as a big difference to a lot of the other versions of the story. Pinocchio basically gets super hungry, and then Geppetto brings him some food, apples, I think.
Yeah.
and he's very picky about which parts of the apple he wants to eat, but he's still hungry after he's done with those parts. So he ends up eating the whole apple, even the parts he didn't want at first. And this is basically teaching kids to not be picky about what food they get, which makes sense in Italy at the time, because it was like a time of many, like I said, wars and like poverty, which discontinued until the like 1950s in Italy, that there wasn't like a lot of food often.
Yeah, yeah. Like I was gonna say, there's important context of like Italy was and unfortunately still is a very poor country in a lot of places. So like you can notice already the commentary on poverty, the fact that you need to preserve food. This also ties in real life because Italian cuisine, like a lot of Southern European cuisine, is about basically using everything in a specific food, vegetable, animal, to just eat everything because you cannot afford a lot of things.
Yeah. So this is very interesting. I find it interesting that it's not there in many adaptations, because it is a theme that is like pretty universal in a lot of countries. But in the Disney version, Geppetto isn't poor, which he is in the book, and there's never like the Pinocchio never has to eat basically. So I find that interesting that it's like not dealing with this rather like important subject.
Yeah.
Okay, what's your next pick?
Oh yeah, so chapter 5 also has a very funny gag where like Pinocchio is so hungry, gets an egg, picks up the egg turns a bird wakes up with the egg, the bird thanks Pinocchio for saving it, and leaves. It's a very funny gag, extremely morbid also.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
he's really,
There's good timing there on how it's executed, because the reader doesn't see it coming.
it's very like, I don't know if I would call Pinocchio so weird, but there's like an absurdism, like silliness to it, and like, I don't know, it's just like how a lot of the humor is. It's just a weird thing happens, but it feels really connected to the theme because like Pinocchio's so hungry, he needs to eat, he gets something to eat, but like, whoops, an animal, a bird got out of the egg, thanks Pinocchio went away.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's pretty funny. Like
Yeah,
that's the thing. Like it connects these like often morbid subjects with humor, which is a very makes sense for the time and place.
I think it's also just like admirable of like any type of kids writing, no matter the age, of like just managing to like do something incredibly morbid, but tell it in a way that can be done for kids, in a way that's pretty still good. And like I like that. Like I think Pinocchio's very good at that. Anyway, my next chapter, okay, is chapter 10.
I
The
knew it.
pup, the puppets recognize Pinocchio as their brother and welcomes him raucously. But when the puppet master shows up, Pinocchio is in danger of meeting tragic end.
So yeah, this is a famous part of the story that is in most adaptations.
Yeah, this one is very much a very famous part. I'll let Ludo explain a bit because there's some very fun things that Ludo has talked about this part.
So, first off, I think most people know the character known as the Fire Eater as another name.
Stromboli?
Yeah, he's called Stromboli in a lot of the adaptations. I think Disney established the Stromboli name, but he's just called the Fire Eater in the
Yeah,
book.
yeah.
And there's basically just commedia dell'arte fan fiction happening in this chapter.
Yes, Harlequin, Ludo,
Yeah,
Harlequin.
Harlequin is there, and he's basically a famous commedia dell'arte character. That was like basically a form of puppet theater that was very popular in Europe.
He was like a sad clown guy, right?
Yeah, he's basically, if you ever seen like the picture of the sad clown with like I think a hat that's like almost like a Santa hat.
Yeah.
That's the
If
Harlequin.
if you ever known, he gets also paired up a lot to take Pelot, the famous sad French clown. So it's like here's the iconic sad clown guys.
Yeah. Now, what I now is the point where I'm gonna like criticized every adaptation ever made of this book.
Wow.
They didn't include the whip of the Fire Eater, which is made of snakes and foxtails.
Yeah.
Which is an amazing visual, which never gets used in any of these adaptations we're going to talk in a later episode. Like, why? It's amazing. It sounds incredible. It's like an epic weapon in an RPG.
My best guess is it's hard to like do in live action.
Yeah, but like it's not in the animated versions either.
It's just like it's the Fire Eater is a very much interesting character. Like that, I think there's like a lot of stuff doing, specifically because like the history of like circus like stuff in Italy that I find interesting. He's also, I'll talk about this next chapter, but he's also has a unique thing that none of the characters in Pinocchio, none of the like so-called villains have. But yeah, I think the chapter is very much interesting because you have the stuff with like the fanfiction aspect, like crossover aspect with Harlequin. You have the setup of like the Fire Eater, which was a very much iconic character. And actually, you just have the stuff. I think the stuff with like Pinocchio and the puppets are interesting because like there's just sentient puppets.
Yeah.
All, like,
this is what we talked about with stuff never gets explained. Like there's just other sentient puppets, and we just accept it.
And one of them is Harlequin.
It's great.
Like the chapter just sets up a lot of stuff. It's a very it's very good at explaining stuff because you go from like Pinocchio's like puppet butters to the puppeteer to just setting up the Fire Eater. And the way the Fire Eater is like said is like very good. The Claudio is very good at writing descriptions. Like you describe it, this like big man with his like snake whip that is so large and scary.
Yeah. He's an impressive character, and he actually gets more depth in this version than in most of the adaptions.
Yeah.
Because he's mostly just an evil guy in most adaptions, but he actually has like a good heart at the end in a later chapter where he doesn't burn Pinocchio in the stove.
So 11, very quickly 11. I think 11 is very interesting because it established the Fire Eater as the only like character to bearing Pinocchio with humanity. Because Pinocchio tells the story to the Fire Eater and about why he's ill. And the Fire Eater just cries. And by crying, he sneezes. He shows like emotionality. Of just like, and it kind of supports tropes of like just evil circus masters. Because he has some kind of humanity to him.
Yeah, that's what I meant with like, he's not a one-dimensional character like in the Disney version where he's just evil. And Pinocchio has to escape. He actually lets Pinocchio go and gives him gold for his father who is poor. Which I guess couldn't happen in the Disney version because Geppetto isn't poor.
Yeah, like I think it's a very much interesting thing to give the only humanity because in a way, the Fire Eater is the only human character in Pinocchio. He's not the personification of some system or like a little talking animal. He's just a human guy.
Yeah, a lot of the other human characters are just like mean or like representations of like, unfair systems inside the Italian state.
Which I think there's probably something there to like Italian circus culture, but that I could not find a lot of resources about that, at least in English. About like just that circus in that era of Italy.
Yeah, I'm sure people like into Pinocchio studies have actually like written more about him.
Yeah, so I think this is very interesting. I think there's a lot to say about the humanity of the Fire Eater and just how it shows Pinocchio as us as a human being crying, just wanting to escape. It's a very good chapter. Your next pick, Ludo?
So I'm gonna go to 15, but I'm gonna fill you all in because they introduce in between these chapters the fox and the cat, which are also famous characters that are in basically every adaptation.
Yeah.
Everybody knows them. They're like pretending to be disabled, which sure is something we could talk about for a long time.
Yeah.
But I'm just gonna go to the point which is very interesting, which is what I quoted at the start, where Pinocchio basically has a long monologue about how he's not afraid of murderers because they're not real, and then they show up masked up, the fox and the cat, and they basically hang him.
Yeah.
Which not only is it hardcore, it was meant to be the end of the story. Like, this was where Collodi was like, yeah, I'm gonna end the story. I'm just gonna kill off this character and be done with this.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
It's he literally killed the puppet the puppet side, the puppet boy.
Yeah, he basically did a Sherlock Holmes on us. He basically killed off the main character and was like, yeah, I'm done with this.
Yeah.
But then, like, his editor and a lot of people were like, no, we want to know what this puppet... no, this puppet has to live and do more stuff.
I think the chapter is very interesting because it goes into a kind of horror vibe to it that I find.
Yeah, it's actually kind of spooky.
Yeah, because it kind of is detailed, specific, just the murder of Pinocchio and stuff like that in a way that's like, it's interesting and kind of goes into like, I guess like, I think of like the original statement of Collodi. It's just like, okay, be a naughty boy, you're gonna get literally murdered.
Yeah, if you don't behave and if you don't like pay respect to like the dangers of the world, they're just gonna murder you, which was very true at the time. Like, a lot of the things here are stuff that could actually happen if you just ran away from home as a kid.
Yeah.
And had money on you.
Yeah, so it's like very much like scaring kids, very much like a moral lesson to stay at home, kids.
Yeah, this is basically the most fairy tale it gets, because like in old school fairy tales, children often just get murdered because they didn't like listen to their parents or didn't think about like a dangerous situation enough.
Like, it very much feels like, yeah, it very much feels very classic fairy tale because it's setting up Pinocchio as the victim of like just his like so-called like wrong morality.
Yeah, he is just a scamp and it's funny, but at the same time he pays a price for it. He's not that like innocent, friendly puppet that you see in the Disney movie. He's basically just goblin mode 24/7.
Yeah, he's goblin mode Pinocchio.
Yeah, this Pinocchio ain't playing.
Yeah,
or it's playing too much.
Okay, so my next subtopics, we're gonna go back in the past. Very quickly.
You're gonna time travel?
Yeah, I'm gonna go with chapter 13 and 14.
Which is the cat and fox ones, yeah. Fox.
Yeah, so let's start. So let's first talk about quickly about the cat and the fox. The cat and the fox are probably the most recurring character in Pinocchio. That's most in the book. They very much represent like old grifter types in Italy. It's literally a fox and a cat to like say the animals who have like, I actually don't know, is the cat able to describe as like a black cat or something? It's like a black.
No, it's like a gray cat, I think.
But yeah, you can notice very much that the cat. It's very much still like very much like shady type person. Like I said, there's a lot of stuff like pretending about stability that's like, oh boy, there's a lot to unpack. But yeah, chapter 13. They tricked Pinocchio. They had the weather quite fair scene, which is an inn, and they just trick him and like have him drink. And it's a very like just interesting chapter. It sets up alongside chapter 14 the next thing, chapter 15, and I just really like the writing because Claudia has the cat and the fox basically talk at the same time. Like one of the out of the other, and it leads to some very good moments. So there's some
they're very funny, shady grifters. They're very entertainingly written.
Like specifically in the inn, you can feel like this thing of like, oh, there's this big inn. There are the food. There's descriptions of like after he like with the book he said like he ordered like the fox. There's like goulash. Quails, rabbits, frogs, lizards. There's just a description of so many food because they trick Pinocchio basically to get food out of him.
Yeah, they make him pay the bill
Yeah.
at the restaurant.
But I asked because but yeah, I really like the last part of this, where the like Pinocchio's talking like the cat in the hat says like, but I want to keep going. The hour is late. I want to keep going. The night is dark. I want to keep going. The world is peerless. I want to keep going. Remember that silver who wanted to do everything and that came way and sooner we get it. Same good story. Good night. This is this introduces us to a very good part. This is not the cat and the fox. Pinocchio is talking with the ghost of the cricket. Because the ghost of the cricket is a recurring character.
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah.
So he's just talking and there's more foreboding with the ghost cricket. It's just the way Pinocchio is doing it. There's just this. The way he's being swindled by the cat and the fox will lead to his doom. Which forbears chapter 15. And then chapter 14 is the same thing. Because it's the start... of the... Wait, you picked chapter 14, right?
I picked 15, but I basically explained what happened up to there.
Yeah, but I agree. There's the monologue about the murders and everything, just setting up. These three chapters very much, because the way they end very much sets up the themes about them being tricked by the cat and the fox tricking Pinocchio. There's stuff going on also about some genuine very Sammy humor, setting up the characters. The ghost cricket. That shows up to 1, and then you have the 13, 14, 15 basically complete the ending of Pinocchio. They're very complete in there and setting up chapter 15.
Yeah.
Okay, your next pick?
I'm gonna go to 17, but I'm gonna fill you in that the way they free Pinocchio from hanging is the blue fairy, which is a girl. Here, she can shapeshift. It's just a thing. You know how this story works.
Yeah.
She can just do stuff. She saves him with some anthropomorphic, the furries show up and save him, basically. And then we get to 17, which is an iconic Pinocchio moment because his nose grows when he lies. Which that happens before in a lot of stories, but here basically the fairy specifically probably gives him this basically curse of his nose grows when he lies.
Yeah, yeah.
Which I found very interesting, that it's not just something that's in his nature. And then I just found that worthy of mention, that happens halfway through the book and is not actually that large a part of the overall Pinocchio story.
I feel like it's explained because it's setting up the morality lesson, it's explaining the punishment, because it's not like Pinocchio, the wooden side. It's not immaterial. It's just the nose thing is setting up rules. Basically, it's setting up the moral rules of Pinocchio.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting.
Yeah, and I also think it's interesting how, in adaptations, this aspect gets magnified so much to the point where people think Pinocchio is a story about not lying, specifically.
Yeah,
when that is 10% of the book.
Yeah, it's very funny because looking up... I looked this up. I looked up Pinocchio on Twitter to see tiny reactions, and what I found is a lot of people, both in Anglo and other countries, going, this politician I don't like. He's just Pinocchio because he lies, which I found very hilarious because the lying expert is also very done playing, and also it's not really about don't lie, lying is bad. It's more don't lie because avoid the morality of this Italy. It's very much different in what's saying about lying.
Yeah. And there are parts where he lies and his nose doesn't grow.
Because it's not about lying is bad, it's more about certain ways of lying.
Yeah, lying to the people that want to help you and stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So I think that's interesting about how the Disney voice now so amplifies and how to think from the text. It's actually not big. Okay, so with my next pick, we return to the Cat and the Fox with chapter 18.
Or the money tree.
Yeah, the money tree. This one is very much things. So after the cat and the fox try to kill Pinocchio, he sees them again, and they lie, of course, in a very funny interaction of motherless or my poor friend. What do you want? They wanted to steal my gold coins, those billions, those wicked billions. Repeats the cat. They basically manipulate. This is a very fun thing in a lot of the adaptations, but that's a Pinocchio. Pinocchio just never like goes. These shady characters that keep on trying to trick me. They can beat the bad guys, right? With the cat and the fox. Which is, I think, it's
Yeah,
very
he
funny.
never questions their morals until like the end.
Yeah. Which I think is very funny. But like I think this is very much like a reoccurring thing. It's just like like shadiness, like how shady people continue to like trick you after the first time.
Yeah, basically the fox and the cat are trying to sell you NFTs.
Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
that kind of person.
Yeah, they want to sell you Bored Apes, Ludo.
Look, I know this Discord was a grift, but I got this new NFT Discord, and this one is for real. You're gonna make so much money with the money tree NFTs. It's gonna be wild.
But but yeah, like they compare the compare Pinocchio that they'll find like a money tree, and they'll like take you to the city. They're like and go to the field of miracles. So they just like take him there.
And the city is like named after like I forgot the naming, but it's like some kind of wordplay on like being fooled.
Yeah. So like you go to the shop though. So go to the shop. So go to the city, and Pinocchio goes, "Is this the field of miracles?" And like the cat and the fox say, "Oh, it's just the field ahead," and they just trick Pinocchio again. Where they convince him to basically just dig a hole. It's
Yeah,
a
he
bit.
puts his money in there, and then they steal his money while he's waiting for the tree to grow. And I guess the whole saying of like money doesn't grow on trees could be related to this story.
I think there's also some things about like how money is like immaterial. Like you cannot make because money is like it's material, but like it's like not.
Yeah, it's
not
not
natural.
organic.
It's not natural. It's a material need you need, but it's not like a tree or food. There's not a money tree. But yeah, like
Yeah.
I think this chapter is very fun. It's just genuinely a very funny thing. It sets up the recurring theme of the cat and the fox, how they keep tweaking. I just really like the comedy of this, just the setting up of like Pinocchio's like the ever tricked side, which is very good. And also I have a bit a quick thing about I'm gonna ask you though. Do you think the cat and the fox are basically like the Rosenstein and Guildenstern Pinocchio? Or they're too
Because
big
they're
to
just
be
like at the edge of the story, and then at the end you find out they got like messed up because they actually go blind and have a like movement disability at the end.
Yeah. So, like, do you think that they're basically this? Like, this weird side characters that keep on showing up and, like, all interferences of the story?
They're very much in that mode, I think. Like this is the only part where they're important, and then they show up later, and they had like an entire story arc probably off screen that we never saw.
It's interesting because I think this is very interesting because they keep recalling, but they're not important, but they keep recalling as, like, another moral lesson. That, like the Fiolito, they're unique, but not because they have humanity, because they don't have humanity. They're little animals. They are just they're unique because they're the only really reoccurring villains in Pinocchio, which I find very interesting. Okay,
Yeah.
very good, Sato. What's your next?
Chapter 19, where Pinocchio goes to jail.
Yeah, I have that also. Luther.
So Pinocchio goes to like accuse the fox and the cat of crimes because they stole his money with the money tree scam NFTs.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
And the judge, who is like an old gorilla, is just like, wait, you got grifted? Put him in jail.
Like,
Which, yeah, that's, there's some commentary happening here about
I
like,
love that
law.
line. It's just like, it's very much like, I think it's a good example of like like this very much overt satire and just how like sometimes it's stating the themes of your work is very good because it creates by having this say oh you were grifted, okay, I'm gonna put you in jail. It very much states in absurd way how the legal system in Italy and even a lot of legal systems do work now. Well, like they punish you for failing for a scam or stuff like that. When like punishing the
It's almost
perpetrators.
like Kafkaesque. Like
Yeah.
you can't understand the way the system works, and it's just gonna punish you.
One question: why do you think that it's a gorilla? Besides, like the cat and the fox are like cats and foxes will say the animals, but like why it's a gorilla?
I think it's basically the whole apes being like a thing that's not seen as intelligent at the
Yeah, yeah,
time.
yeah.
Like the judge is just like a brute, a big brute who doesn't think about shit.
Yeah, it makes sense. So this is a very much interesting chapter, like because it's so absurd. Also, it's so scholarly talent because I don't know if gonna you don't have chapter 20, right?
Uh, no, I
No,
have
no,
chapter
no,
20,
no, no,
but
no, no, no,
I'm gonna
no,
tell. Huh?
no. I was wrong because in chapter 19, it happens. In Pinocchio gets jailed, then there's a prison breakout and he gets removed from jail in the same chapter. That's why I wanted to mention.
Yeah,
Which
yeah.
is so,
Basically, there's some kind of festivity because some noble is like marrying, and they release all the prisoners, but only those that did crimes.
yeah.
And Pinocchio says like, yeah, didn't actually do a crime. And then they say, yo, we're not going to free you. Then he says, okay, no, actually I'm a crook. And then they free him.
This is
And
very,
this is like a situation where his nose doesn't grow even though he has to lie.
yeah, like it shows again that like Pinocchio is not a basic. It's not about lying is bad. It's more specific about certain lying social situations. But that's what's just like how in the literal same chapter as he went to goes to jail, he gets like in like 4 paragraphs he gets removed from jail. It's a very quick like writing episode, which I think is
Yeah,
kind of genius.
I think Collodi was like, oh shit, I'm not going to give this guy a prison arc. I'm just going to free him again.
Well, Coloni was too close of a coward. This is why Bonini, Coloni walked so Bonini could run.
Yeah. We're going to get to that next episode.
No, because the Bonini movie has like a 30-minute prison arc for Pinocchio.
That's
Okay,
true.
yeah.
He's in prison for a moment.
Okay, next chapter?
Let's go just to 20 because that's the funniest chapter to me. This is kind of my favorite chapter because it's the closest that Pinocchio gets to like a filler chapter in the way DBZ does, because it's also one of the funniest chapters. Just like the episode where like Goku learns to drive a car.
Yeah.
So Pinocchio just meets a scary snake. And then the snake trolls him, and the snake laughs so hard it dies.
It's weird.
That's basically all that happens.
It's a very weird chapter.
Yes, I don't know if there's like some kind of moral or like satire happening. Maybe it's lost to me or to time, but it's very funny.
I mentioned to you before that I thought this was like a scorpion the snake thing, but it's not because that was like from Wasi, I think you said. Like
yeah, and that story is like was written after. That fable came up after that story. This story was written.
And that's the thing with like the thing with the scorpion and the snake. Not to turn this into another Friday podcast. Like the thing is, they both end in mutual destruction in most of the versions because it's a story about like mutual destruction in a way. In this, the snake just starts laughing. It's really absurd.
I think the best I can read out of this is like, if you troll people just for fun, you're gonna die.
Wow.
Like this snake just wanted to like scare Pinocchio, and then it died because it was too funny to him.
He died from being the Zorkel. Well,
yeah.
We salute the hero. The hero.
It's incredible. It bursts a blood vessel. It's written that way. So don't make fun of people too much. You might burst a blood vessel.
Yeah. I think it's also not a very funny chapter. There's like a lot of weird dark humor in it. It's very interesting. Again, I think how the
I assume you're gonna pick the next chapter, which follows this one, which is 21.
actually my next pick is 22.
Oh wow. Oh yeah, that's connected. Those two are kind of connected. They're one arc.
Yeah. So Pinocchio, this is not the weird one. Pinocchio becomes a god dog. And like,
What does he do again that he like upsets that farmer so that he gets basically made a guard dog for him?
he tries to steal grapes.
Right. Because he's hungry. Again, this theme of like hunger.
And like there's like a whole thing in chapter 22 where like there's like another dog that died because he was murdered or something, and Pinocchio knew the dog and just like was just like what's the dog, and he becomes a watchdog. It's not a weird chapter,
Yeah, because
but
like even he is a puppet, but like he's a child puppet, and this farmer is just like, yeah, this is gonna be the greatest watchdog. I'm gonna enslave this kid's puppet.
I think it's not the one to think about because I'm just like the first chapter has thoughts about poverty and everything. This is very much.
I mean,
Like,
this and the later part go very much into like child labor.
Yeah,
Like,
I think that's the
enforced
thing.
child labor. Yeah.
I think that's the thing because it's doing a metaphor about child labor where like Pinocchio basically gets turned into an animal basically, into like a
Yeah.
watchdog, which I find interesting. It's like it's very much like interesting because it shows like Pinocchio being used as not like basically an object, which is very much interesting. It's also just weird, and there's some and there's like some things where Pinocchio goes woof woof woof. It is very funny, also.
Yeah.
The
And then he basically catches some robbers who wanna get the chickens, right?
Yeah, so he gets rewarded. He gets his liberty by doing a good act.
Yeah. I think now the next one is like the real humzinger.
Okay, let's go. I still have something to 23.
Yeah, I think we both have that one. So the blue fairy basically wanted Pinocchio to return, but then he got into all these shenanigans with like the going to jail, meeting a snake, and becoming a watchdog. So when he comes back, the blue fairy fakes her death to teach Pinocchio a lesson.
Yeah.
That's so wild. Like he just finds her gravestone and then he weeps. And then
Yeah.
once he cried enough, the fairy's like, "Okay, I only pretended. Sorry, sorry, Pinocchio."
It's a fucking weird morality, like emotionality twist.
Oh yeah, like the blue fairy is doing some fucked up stuff from like nowadays standards. This is not even the only time this happens. Like the blue fairy is gonna punish him like on a psychological level, you could say.
Yeah.
It's not gaslighting, it's more like she's manipulating him emotionally.
Yeah.
But if you only know the Pinocchio Blue Fairy from like Disney, where she's like this perfect feminine figure, this isn't the same in the book. Like this Blue Fairy like messes with Pinocchio if he doesn't behave.
Yeah. It's very much an interesting chapter because it's about. She's like a like really a fairy in fairy tales because she's testing Pinocchio in some way. She is kind of in a way like a trickster, like a traditional like fairy, like
Yeah.
folklore fairy. With
Yeah,
very
she's
much,
not like a Disney fairy, which only
Yeah.
do good.
and also she doesn't have blonde hair.
No, she has blue hair, which is freaking rad. I don't know why they didn't keep that.
Well, she has blue hair and is a fairy. Wow.
See, the 1940s Disney version didn't want that SJW blue hair girl.
God, I'm laughing like a donkey.
Oh no, you're at Pleasure Island, Alan.
No, that's how I laugh. I literally laugh like the so-called donkey. That's my two ways of laughing. Anyway, but yeah, I think this is very much interesting because it's very much testing Pinocchio's like emotionality. Like Athos Saptos about metatextually and in context testing Pinocchio's like morality. This is about his emotionality. Does he feel sadness? And the answer is yes.
Yeah,
Because he
like it
has
shows that he
humanity.
has like yeah, a human nature and like feels loss when he loses somebody he cares about.
It's interesting because like I will ask you this before we go to the next chapter. Like the Blue Fairy is not the macho figure in the book, but is he like where in terms of figures is he to Pinocchio? Is he like a mentor or something? Would you
She's
put?
almost like an like godmother, like an adopted, like a second mother.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
feel like because she like teaches him like harsh lessons, like a godmother would in a fairy tale. Well, not in the sense that she's like the evil godmother, but like more in like she gonna teach him how to live. You're gonna learn today, Pinocchio, even if I like mess you up.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, she's a complex figure. Like you can look at her from many angles.
And that's she's like the only like notable woman in Pinocchio.
Yeah, she's the only like woman character that gets like more than one line of dialogue or something.
Yeah, like she's like I'm not gonna say it's like progressive for the time or anything, but like it's not that sexist, I guess. Go
She's
on.
not as much of like a feminine idealization as the Disney version.
She's at least her like own weird character.
Yeah, she's just a weirdo who like wants to teach Pinocchio stuff.
Like this whole bit is like a Looney Tunes bit. It could show me like a Looney Tunes sketch from the 40s in it, and like that has a similar bit like this.
Yeah, there's like a bit that follows, which I skipped in my selection, where she trolls him again, and it's
Yeah.
even more like a Looney Tunes bit, where
Yeah.
she
Okay.
like makes him stay hungry for a long time.
Okay. Chapter. What's your next chapter?
I skipped to 27 here
Yeah.
because Pinocchio almost kills a child and gets arrested again.
Is this the gang fight? Because it's such
Yeah, this is after Pinocchio starts going to school and he has like scampish friends who are like the mischievous, and they take him to see Monstro at the beach.
So this is also on my list. Pinocchio starts a gang fight with kids. It's very funny.
Yeah, he throws a book at a child. The child like no, a child throws a book at Pinocchio. Pinocchio dodges, and then the book hits another child and almost kills it.
This is the old Italian version of like those Yakuza movies. Like there's a big like youth like teen gang fight. This is that, but like with Pinocchio and little
This is
kids.
also where Collodi mentions his references his own book, and then the book almost kills a child.
Yeah, he literally passes like the book by Collodi and like just hits kids. It's very fucking morbid.
It's extremely meta and modern for like a book from that time that like he inserts his own novel and then kills a child almost.
It's this is very interesting. I think the moral of like this is very much like those don't trust those evil like one book sees kids, but also it's very much like Pinocchio can fight. Pinocchio can just like he's now at the point where like he's not a scared kid anymore.
Yeah, he has some agency and some knowledge of the world.
Yeah, and like those kids, he wants to go to school, but the fight and what happens next, like stops him from doing that.
So yeah, that's a very interesting part I felt, which leads to a part that is basically in no adaptation, like in two adaptations we watched,
Yeah, yeah.
where Pinocchio almost gets eaten, like he gets almost fried.
That's 20.
28.
Okay, I had 24, but I'll skip that and just say 24 is also very funny. It's
Is that the other fairy trolling?
24 has him talking to the dolphin about the pet. I think that's the fairy disguise or something, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
24 is a very funny troll moment Oh, and just thank you, Blue Fairy. You're
Yeah.
hilarious. You should get a
Uh,
Netflix stand-up session or something. I don't know.
yeah, why did they not make a movie that's just showing the story from the perspective of the Blue Fairy?
Yeah, where's the Blue Fairy movie? Okay, 24. Explain it all?
28, you mean?
Yeah, 28.
Um, so Pinocchio flees because he got arrested again, and then he ends up in a net because he swims out on the ocean, and a fisherman pulls him in with his with a bunch of fish, and then he thinks Pinocchio is a fish, and then he tries to eat him.
This
Which
is.
that's a lot.
I remember when we first saw this in one of the adaptations, we were very much, what is this? And I had to look it up, and it was, wait, this isn't the book. But makes much more sense in the book because it's about poverty. Also, it's again about poverty and food. And
Yeah.
the product, because it's a fisherman in an area where I imagine it was very hard to actually get fish. Just so desperate to eat food that he thinks they wouldn't care. Is a fish.
It's also kind of like he is shown to be kind of messed up. Like he's like an old fisherman that just lives in a cave and all he does is like fish and eat.
It's interesting because I do say that the Fire Leader is like the only character of humanity, but I do wonder if Cannoli both this character to some understanding of like, wow, the sky! I wish the sky did not go like this.
Yeah, it's hard to tell because at the same time he could also be like the biblical sin, you know, of what is it called when you want to
Gluttony?
eat too much?
Gluttony? Or something?
Yeah, gluttony. He could also be gluttony because he's like all excited about trying a new kind of fish when he talks to Pinocchio.
It is
He doesn't care that Pinocchio can talk. Like he just wants to eat him.
I'm gonna make a take. Pinocchio is basically Italian Death Wish.
What?
Because
Elaborate.
it's about how you cannot trust anyone. It's
Yeah,
not about
in a
the
way.
shady people.
You can only trust your family and a blue fairy that trolls you.
Like with Death Wish, it's about you cannot trust anyone and say things.
Yeah,
Just
it
the
is very
shadiness.
raunchy. It gets very sleazy when like everybody tries to fuck with Pinocchio. That's true.
Yeah, this is basically Pinocchio Sans Watson. Pinocchio's.
And then he gets saved by a dog he saved before.
Yeah. Like,
Which again shows like that actually it's not Death Witch because like he saved that dog and then the dog saved him in return. So like it's the whole if you do good things, maybe it's gonna like get repaid later.
Yeah, but there is definitely an aspect of like the most like the parts of like Italian society that you need to be scared of and like protect yourself. Trust no one but your family and like the dog you once friends with. I don't know.
Yeah, that's very much in there. Like those figures of trust are mostly the family and like one kind woman.
Which is like it's a very like Southern European like Italian thing.
Yeah. It's very reflective of like even nowadays Italian society. And I mean, for that time, it makes a lot of sense that like a lot of people would try to exploit you
Yeah.
who aren't part of your family.
Yeah, because Pinocchio gets either exploited, like almost eaten, etc., etc. Okay, not a very interesting little subtle.
So then we get the whole Pleasure Island arc.
31. Pinocchio arrives at Pleasure Island, right? He sees some donkeys. He has like I think it says like 3 months of putting or something.
Which is
Yeah.
a lot more than he gets like in the Disney one, where it's like one night.
And this whole chapter is very much like interesting because he parties, he does a lot of things, and he basically becomes a donkey. Not basically, he becomes a donkey. This is the transformation of the donkey.
Yeah, this is where the body horror really sets in.
And I like this because Claudia goes basically imagine the horror of Pinocchio becoming a donkey.
Yeah, it's very cool described. It's actually very well written.
Like it is very much it kind of feels like old Sluggy Hollow, but in a good way. Of like, these hollows are so unhollowable to imagine that you meet to
Yeah,
imagine themselves.
it's almost Lovecraft writing, like the unspeakable horror. And then
Imagine it to yourself.
but then they immediately joke about it. Like
Yeah.
he immediately goes back into like comedy by like the two kids laughing at each other about their donkey ears.
Yeah, and it's pretty much like, it's interesting because it's punishing Pinocchio for like, it's punishing Pinocchio for like not studying and like going to say the characters. And there's also setting up of like, oh, the coast driver has like a donkeys driving the coast. But there's like still a lot of warmness
Oh,
because
there's a really fucked up part there where like one of the donkeys tries to talk, and the carriage driver bites off his ear.
oh yeah.
That's so messed up.
So yeah, but like there's still like a lot of like humanity in the chapters, and this is probably like the chapter and chapters overall with most writing, which I find interesting because it feels like the part like Collodi was most proud of.
Yeah. I feel like this really like is the most clear metaphor he makes in the whole book. Like if you don't go to school, you're gonna take an advantage of, and you're gonna turn into a donkey, and you're just gonna be like somebody's like working animal.
It is interesting because there's other parts of like this is like similar to Cat in the Hat, but like the way this is weird, like describing this country resemble no other country in the world. It was composed entirely of sail and stuff like that. The descriptions are very vivid in a way that like imagines this like manipulation of kids, and, like say label like Hollow in a way that's very good. It's just putting you. It's very unsettling.
Yeah, it's creepy. Um,
It
so
is.
then he goes through an entire arc where he's like in the circus and stuff. I didn't write a lot of that because it's pretty identical to the Disney version.
Yeah.
The whole circus act and stuff, and then he like gets hurt and has to get sold to be made into a drum.
Yeah.
This is the part where I get like the other one of the last two big body horror beats where when he turns back into a puppet. So I just have written here Donkey Mech
Yeah.
because
Wow.
like he gets thrown into the ocean and like fishes eat off his donkey shell, and below it is Pinocchio.
It's kind of body horror like. It's weird. It's really weird.
Yeah, so like the entire time that donkey had a puppet in it.
Like I see
It's
why
wild.
like I see why in all of the adaptations Special Island is one of the most like important things because like it's Collodi at his best, it's horrific, it's funny, there's still a lot of humanity. Like it's interesting because Collodi doesn't like 100% condemn the kids, it's more like oh those foolish kids than it's going, oh those damn kids.
Yeah, it's more like, damn, the world is cruel and fucked up, so you have to like learn this stuff, kids. Sorry.
It's interesting because there's still a lot of humanity in it, which I find fascinating. Yeah. It's a
Yeah,
good
yeah,
it's a good series of chapters and chapter. It's your time? Like
yeah. We kind of lost the order on that stuff, but
no,
we went through it pretty well.
I
I don't
watched
have
31.
anything noted else besides the very last chapter.
Okay, let's go into my chapters. It's 36.
Okay.
36? It's the last one actually.
Okay. So just to summarize, after he's turned back, he goes through the whole Monstro arc where he finds Geppetto, and then he has to like nourish him, and he has to work to get milk to power up Geppetto back to normal.
Like Popeye.
Yeah, and the Blue Fairy shows basically up and rewards him for like doing something good for his family and proving that he's like morally cool now. He learned his lesson.
Yeah.
And there's the really creepy beat at the end when he gets turned into a human, where he looks back at his frigging puppet shell that just lies there like an empty husk.
It's a very interesting like literalization of like just looking at your old body.
Yeah, he gets reborn. It's not like the puppet body becomes a human body. He literally gets a new body.
Which is interesting.
Yeah, that only showed up in like one or two adaptations we watched, and it was very horrifying.
Yeah. I wanted to point out some things like this is the end of the Cat and the Fox. They actually
They
go
show up
blind,
again.
and they go
Yeah.
blind. Which is like there's like probably some like I don't know if it would be like ableist, but it does feel like disability as punishment stuff.
Yeah, it's very much like almost like a karmic punishment. Like you get what you deserve in the end, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. It was just like some things like seeing disability as like a punishment. Like it's there. It's kind of very funny because they just get killed, not get killed, like suffer a punishment in the end. The only ones to suffer. This
Yeah.
Colody really hated Gweftos. Wow.
Yeah, I guess he was like he bought some NFTs sometime, and
He bought
it made him really bitter.
he wants some apes.
Yeah, that's why there's a gorilla judge, because he bought the apes.
Oh my god, anyway, but yeah, there's also, it's interesting because they describe like, first the cricket shows up as like a morality thing, which like is really interesting because it's basically still like the Disney thing where like the cricket shows up as like a moral guidance, even if he only stepped up in a couple of chapters.
Yeah, he
It's
doesn't
interesting.
show up in the second half, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, but he's there and basically telling me, and basically Pinocchio thanks him in a way. It's interesting.
Right, he comes back and he's like, "Thank you, cricket."
Yeah.
So yeah, that's basically the book, right?
I want to mention one last thing, which is the Blue Fairy, because they mentioned the Blue Fairy basically like Diaries of Tom or something. It's no,
I don't think it really dies.
No, the Blue Fairy, the poor fairy is beheaded in the poorhouse. Unfortunately, having suffered 1,000 hardships, she's gravely ill and can no longer afford to buy herself even a coster bed.
Yeah, but you know how the Blue Fairy does.
Like I think this is
She's just trolling.
like I think this is literal. I think this is more the themes of poverty.
Yeah, but I think it's just like she's trolling him again.
Like
Because like the Blue Fairy doesn't need like earthly goods.
but
She
isn't
can
there,
just
like,
create houses and like has anthropomorphic servants.
but
She
isn't that
doesn't
like
actually need anything.
isn't that like the most like ironic fate about the material society we live in? That even the most immaterial being, a little fairy, suffers from poverty and cannot longer buy bread to eat.
I
don't know, it
didn't
feels-
think about that angle, but that is an interesting angle to look at it. That like at the end she actually becomes poor. Maybe because she spent all her fortune on trolling Pinocchio.
Like I do think it's like something about like even the most immaterial beings suffers from material conditions. Which is
Like
to
I
say,
said, it's not impossible.
Which
To
is
me,
to
it
say-
just read like the fairy is fucking with Pinocchio's mind again.
which is to say, Pinocchio is a Marxist text. Thank
Yeah,
you.
it's definitely early Marxism. Actually, this is Marx was alive while this came out.
I wonder if Marx read Pinocchio.
I hope.
Okay, anyway, that was Pinocchio. It's a very good book. I like it a lot.
This is actually a good segue because our next part is gonna be like talking about like the different lenses and readings you can apply to this story.
Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff. There's like you can read.
I mean, do you have anything on the maybe the Marxists? Did you find anything or see anything here?
I did not find anything, but it feels like Collodi was a liberal in like the very much classical world sense. Socialism was already a thing. There was like a early like socialist party in Italy at the time the kingdom was made. Something like a communist party. Collodi was very much a liberal, but I think he was like he
had some progressive ideas for a like Republican because he believed like in stuff like everybody deserves shelter and food, which is a very socialist idea.
Yeah, it's very much he feels like the most like he was probably like one of the more left leaning liberals of the time, but he's still very much kind of liberal because like at the end of the day, Pinocchio is very much like it's less about community and more trusting the individuals, even though those individuals could form a community.
Yeah,
It's more about trusting the like couple people you trust and like actually not that to be a Marxist text you need a leftist text you need to like come up with a solution to things. It's just like it feels much more individualist. Still, I think it's very much like he was concerned into poverty enough that you could read like Marxist leanings about this. Like Pinocchio doesn't really label, but he's like exploited by like people. He's exploited by farmers. Exploited by people. Was actually there's like some Marxist like going back to like the farmer subtitle. Like there's probably some Marxist readings you can read of like the petit bourgeois, like the not the fully rich, but not like the fully poor that actually still rely on some like exploitation. Though I think that the term is more used for like shopkeepers and farmers. Farmers are like the lone weird social class, but there's like
yeah,
still readings of like exploitation there
yeah,
and
yeah. That
other
makes
elements.
sense. There
Like
really isn't any like big like depiction of collectivism in a positive sense
in a
in
way,
the
like the
story.
in a way like the most collectivistic tragedy. It's like it's Pleasure Island. That's like horrible.
I guess school is kind of a like institution that gets depicted positively.
It's interesting because I was reading a text. I know I sent it to you about like Collodi was very much like against like mandatory sending kids mandatorily, not because he was against kids not learning, but because he was against like parents needing to pay money for something that was mandatory, which I find interesting
Yeah,
because school is still like sold positively. It's like more art or things that are winning school, not school itself. School itself is also kind of positive. It's your
yeah. I
institution.
think from what I read, he wanted school to be like free,
Yeah, yeah.
like something you didn't have to pay for, and also something that was like not decided upon by like the upper class, like what is taught and stuff.
Which is like actually a very progressive lens for the time. So like, it's interesting because it's also like the only institution he seems to have any trust in. Because he has no trust for the police, for like the judgment system. There's like no mentions of like the government, but the little first chapter makes fun of kings.
Yeah, which brings me to like the a lens that's more applicable, I say, which is like more of an anarchist lens,
Yeah,
because like he's a scamp and he doesn't want to follow rules, right?
yeah,
But then he has to basically learn how to live within society, even if there's no authority that like forces him to.
yeah, yeah. That makes
And
sense.
there's a lot of stuff like about like you said the police and the state won't protect you, so like you have to basically have your a community or like your family that
It's
helps you.
interesting because Italy historically has had like a big like amount of anarchists
Yeah, Italy
even at the
has
time.
around that time a big anarchist movement, so it's not impossible that some of these ideas were introduced like to Collodi.
As I'm gonna ask you, is Pinocchio an egoist? Does he have spooks?
I don't think so, because he starts out selfish, but then he has this arc of like learning to care for other people, and at the
Yeah,
end he provides for his father and everything.
like I was joking, but I don't think like I think this goes interesting. Like you could read it maybe it's like because there's various kinds of anarchism. It's interesting because I don't think it's part of like right wing anarchism or like the kind of more liberal elements of it. It does feel like it doesn't feel fully leftist, but it's interesting.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
just
it's
it
definitely a cool angle to look at the story from.
it feels very much like you in a way you can read like the need for community for family as a way of like an anarchist like community of family or like people you know and trust. Like it's not that because it's very individualist, but it's still it's interesting.
Yeah, he's
Like
basically in a commune with a snail and a blue fairy
wow,
at one point.
goalless. Well,
Yeah. Who doesn't want to do that?
well, I'll say this because I have to mention this. There's also can read some like transness to Pinocchio in an interesting way, though. Like this is like Italy, very old Italy. I don't think trans people talked about at the time. Like
Yeah,
different
yeah, but
language, but like
like a reading can be interesting even if it wasn't implied
yeah,
or if it
yeah,
wasn't meant.
yeah. I agree. This is why I mentioned this. Like there's stuff like that about like like the stuff about like Pinocchio wanted to become a weird boy, like that's just like trans people, not just like trans people, any trans person. There's stuff like this about like even just like him going from a NATO set to a NATO is like you could draw some interesting parallels like trans just like finding new varieties and anything. It's an interesting lens specifically because Xander in Pinocchio is not really that Manson. Like he's the boy, but there's like not really a lot of performative masculinity in Pinocchio. And then in
Yeah,
either
which is
side.
interesting because a lot of the like independence movement of Italy was like framed around like Italy reclaiming its masculinity because it was like seen as a very effeminate culture
Which is
in Europe.
interesting.
Yeah.
This is this is why I find the transness interesting because you can find things about the Pinocchio like becoming weird boy, stuck with the boy, like finding his own uncomfortability with his body in a way that I find interesting because otherwise Xander doesn't really get mentioned in Pinocchio in a way that I think might be on purpose. Like I'm not gonna say like Claudia was a naughty feminist, but it feels kind of on purpose.
Also, there's a lot of body horror, and we all know that's very trans.
Yes. Let's go with the body horror angle. Like, there's a lot of like, I think this is very much traditional fairy tale. Is like, since Pinocchio is seen as immaterial, since it's a piece of wood you can like, it's like in an old cartoon. Like, it's okay to kill an enemy, and like, it's okay to kill the foot soldiers a lot because it's a robot. Don't worry about it. It's a robot.
Yeah, yeah, like his feet get burned, he gets hanged, he gets like eaten almost.
It's interesting because
All kind of shit happens.
we as humans, not just to children, but we as humans justify sewing things that we normally, for various reasons, don't like sewing to other people, even if they're like adult, even if we somehow masculate that, even if it looks like a human,
Yeah,
like
there's also like the animal abuse angle that plays into that.
yeah, because like a lot of because like those recurring bits of just animals getting killed, but trying to teach Pinocchio in a way that like humans don't get killed.
Yeah, and the children get turned into donkeys to basically justify their exploitation.
Yeah.
Like they're being sold to people who don't know they're buying children.
Yeah, so I think it's fascinating because in a way it's a way to tell about. It feels very much Claudio was aware of that, so he was probably aware that he could probably just get away with a lot of things if he used a puppet, and in the
Or an
same way,
animal.
yeah. So he can tell kids that. I think that's interesting. I think there's also a lot of other and that's like how it goes into like Pinocchio in general is very like pseudo horror in a way. Like I know the Toro. I'm gonna mention this before, but the Toro like thought Pinocchio was very like Frankenstein in its gothic aspects, and I think it's interesting to call Pinocchio gothic because it kind of is. Once you think about it seriously, because it's a kid alone in the dark streets, while being attacked by little talking animals, by little things, we're having this angst.
And a lot of the book is like set at night.
And you could think like how that combines with something like Frankenstein. That's like the modern Prometheus, something created. We create this being, even though Pinocchio is just not given life. He just exists. But like, it's really interesting to think Pinocchio is a horror text because there's like a morbidness to it that I find interesting.
Definitely. I guess a very obvious angle is like the pedagogic Bildungsroman,
Yeah,
which basically meant to like teach children valuable life lessons. And I think that's like the most common lens to look at Pinocchio, which makes a lot of sense because I feel like that's like the implied and the that's the reading that's meant by Collodi
yeah, yeah.
to basically teach you to like not trust some weird stranger who wants to sell you NFTs.
Wow.
I think more people should have probably read Pinocchio because we could like be in a better world right now, you know.
Ludo against NFTs. Wow, fucked up. Against the apes. Against the boss apes.
I'm pro that rocket going into space though with the rich people. I think that's a very good idea.
Yeah, okay. Another thing I want to mention, not to put into, I want to just want to mention one more weeding, which is the Wee Lizard's weeding. Because it's interesting, because Pinocchio is not the Wee Lizard's text. What's his name again? I forgot.
Collodi.
Collodi was very much like liberal of the time, was very much a secularist. So religion doesn't really get made in Pinocchio, but from what I've read, there's like a debate in Italy about if Pinocchio was a religious text or not, because Italy is a very Catholic country, and I find it interesting, like...
It makes sense that culture would try to reframe it in a way that they can better understand.
I would say this, do you think there's anything to the religious reading? Because I find it fascinating it gets used again in like that of Pinocchio. Do you think there's anything of Catholicism, because there's folk religionism and like...
So the thing is, I think there might be unattended Catholicism in here, because there is Christian morality applied, like I said, with like the fisherman could be seen as like gluttony, or the fox and the cat, they could be seen as greed. They can be seen as like different variations of sins.
Yeah.
And the blue fairy can be seen like as the Virgin Mary, even though she's really mean.
I'll say this and then explain, because I know Ludo doesn't know what this is. Do you think it's a zombie Catholic test? And what I mean by zombie Catholic is a word used French, made by a French academic, about describing about how a lot of French secular people, even atheists, while decrying religion, still fundamentally believe in a lot of Catholic models, because it is still part of French culture.
Oh, so is that the Catholic version of a Protestant work ethic?
It's about how Catholicism still seeps in your mentality, even if you're like a big atheist.
I totally believe that's the case, because like while Collodi fought against the Pope in a war, which is pretty wild, he also grew up Catholic. Like he wasn't born a liberal, as far as I know.
Yeah,
he lived with a big family. A lot of his siblings died when he was a child. He very much had like the rural Catholic poor person life. So I think even though he was disillusioned with Catholicism as an adult, he still had like those morals taught to him as a child, and it's replicated to a certain degree in this book.
Yeah. It still feels very much Catholic in structure, specific stuff like, fundamentally, at the end of the day, who Pinocchio, it's still a bit the Pinocchio family, even if it's a battle, doesn't have a wife. It still feels very nuclear family. It still feels very much like traditional Catholic structure, even if it's kind of notable that Zepeto is like a guy that's a wife. But it feels very much
kind of starts being more of a single father story, but then the blue fairy kind of fills that void of a mother figure.
Like it feels very much still like put in Catholic tradition, even if Collodi was a liberal in terms of just the typical Catholic belief and everything of the era that seeps into these works. So I think that's interesting. Is Pinocchio a tad cat?
No.
Well, he doesn't believe that the Vatican is communist. Well.
Also, we're gonna very quickly answer the question if Pinocchio is a homunculi.
Yes.
The answer is no.
Well, no.
Because he has sentience before he gets formed into a human, and a homunculi is like an artificial human being.
Yeah.
So he could be a homunculi at the end when the blue fairy turns him into a real boy.
Yeah. Okay,
because then he's basically an artificial human. He was like not born through like pregnancy. I think it's interesting, like one of the texts mentions that like Collodi was interested in the occult and mesmerism.
yeah.
And I think like his fascination with fairy tales could be connected to that.
Yeah, it feels very much like I think there's aspects of like folk religion, like folk beliefs in Pinocchio that are interesting. Even just having like talking animals and like Pinocchio being very animalist, like you mentioned. I think it's very interesting.
Yeah, because like not a lot of fairy tales go that hard on the like anthropomorphic animal angle than this.
Like it stays and like what Puss in Boots.
Yeah, there's a couple, but mostly they have like one character that is a talking animal, or like maybe two or three.
Yeah,
And here there's entire villages with like animal people.
yeah, it's interesting, and it's like it feels a way like as like a mess, like they must like put in like a way to tell like Muppet stars that hurting any humans.
Yeah.
Okay, are we done or something else before we end the podcast?
So for the listeners, next episode is gonna be about different adaptations of Pinocchio from different cultures and times. We're gonna focus mostly on movie adaptations, but we're also gonna mention some like book adaptations, just as a side note. And then the last episode is gonna be about the two big releases of Pinocchio this year. So that's gonna be a traditional Gemini movies episode.
Yeah, get hype. As always, you can find me as Alice Full of What on Twitter, Alice Full of What on Twitch, YouTube. I have a Patreon, I'm gonna put it. Ludo?
I'm on co-host now.
Ja, co-host also. Alice, de Zokke van podcast on co-hosten.
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
on co-host on Twitter, both Ludovico_LTD.
Okay.
And I hope you all enjoyed this, and see you all next week for the next part of Pinocchio Fever.
Wow, bye!
Bye.
Pinocchio Mania, bye. Italian mafia, I don't know.